You're on, sir.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's so pleased that you made it all the way in 15 minutes. I'm very flattered by that. My name is Matthew Mitchell. I have alcoholism. It is truly a pleasure, a privilege to be able to be here and speak with you. I wasn't kidding when I talked to Ben. I said, do I have to say my experience, strength, and hope? And he said, do whatever you want. and so I wanted to talk about something, but I'll end up telling my story, I'm sure. But I also asked him how long I had to talk, and he goes, stop at 8 o'clock. Well, I'm in California, so it's 5:09 right now. So I've got 3 hours to tell you all what happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I still won't be able to do it. I'm very humbled by what's happened to me here in AA. I, in the truest sense of that word, I am silenced and stilled by the grandeur of what has happened to me without my being able to make it come about. And I think that would be today, I just said that, my definition of humility. There are some friends of mine on this Zoom, and thank you for being there. And thank you. It's nice to meet everybody. My sobriety date is May 16th, 1993, but I thought I'd start the story on March 6th, 2021, today. I woke up this morning at 5 o'clock in the morning, which I do every day, and I was going to get coffee from my wife, and I got a text from a guy that said, somebody told me to call you. And so I said, call me. And he was having trouble staying sober. And I was making coffee from my wife in the little room over here and talking to him about where he is and powerlessness. And I made a date to meet him tomorrow at 6:30 in a neighboring town for coffee. And then I took coffee into my wife and I fed our dogs. And then I walked into this room and sat over there, and I dialed into a meditation call I started about 15 years ago, and about 25 people jumped on with me. And one of the people who comes read something they liked, spiritual passage, and we meditated for 20 minutes, and then we hung up, and then we got, I drank my coffee and I read a book that I love for 10 minutes, a spiritual book I read every day. And then I called my good friend Carla. We talk every Saturday, and we talk for about an hour. And she's a woman that I tell everything to, and I know everything about her. And we end the call with telling each other how much we love each other. And I felt enriched by that phone call. And then I got in and went to talk to my wife for a minute, and ended up working a step with somebody I forgot that I scheduled. And I did that. And then my wife and I got ready, and our daughter called, and we talked to her, and we called our son, and then I called one of our other daughters, and then we went shopping. And after I helped my wife get ready, and we just hung around, and we came home, and I took a nap, and I woke up about 15 minutes before I got on here. And the reason I wanted to tell, and I played guitar for about an hour in here. I'm a guitar player, and I see that there's another guy with a bunch of guitars hanging on his wall. It always comforts me. But the reason I say that is because it was effortless. It was effortless. I didn't wake up and think, what did I say yesterday that I have to remember today? What lie am I trying to keep going? I got paid Friday, and that whole paycheck is still in the bank. My wife trusts me implicitly, and we've been married for 25 years. I have brought her coffee consistently every day for 25 years. And 27 years ago, almost 28, in May of 1993, the way my day looked is I would wake up, maybe if I went to bed, I would wake up around noon or 2 in the afternoon. And I'd be really careful not to make too much noise, because I lived all by myself in an apartment, but I wasn't paying rent on that apartment. I lived near the ocean, and I never saw it. It was less than 100 yards from my back door. And I just heard it because I never left the apartment. There was a girl across town who was pregnant with my child, and she was 18 years old, and I was 31. And I'm not proud of this, but I want to be honest. I could hardly stand looking at her. And the odd thing about alcoholism and the perspective alcoholism gives us, when I thought about her, I thought, God, I can't have a child with her. She's selfish and self-centered. And she was 18 and I was 31. My mother lived a few miles from me with my father. They were married for 45 years, and my mother was terminally ill. And dying pretty seriously. She's not going to get better from the cancer she had. And I would call her occasionally, and sometimes in a blackout, sometimes when I'd been up all night, and I'd say, I'm going to come see you, Mom. And I'm sure I meant to go see her. And I never went. I was unemployable. I had had the best job I'd ever had. I was the lead guitar player in a recording touring band, wrote songs, traveled all over the world. And I drank myself out of that job. And when I was in that apartment, I had already lost a couple of jobs that were too lame for me to go to, or they were beneath me. And one of those jobs was a restaurant manager. And I had gotten one of the waitresses pregnant, and she told me the day they fired me. And so I'm in this apartment going nowhere. And you know, the outside, I owed tens of thousands of dollars to people. I was wanted by the police. I had plenty of warrants out for my arrest. I had no idea how much taxes I owned. I was just living like an animal. In fact, I was an animal. That girl came to my house in early May of 1993, and she wanted me to go to the doctor with her, and I pushed her down a flight of stairs. And I didn't want to hurt her. I would never want to hurt someone like that. And I didn't want to hurt that baby. I didn't even know anything about them, but I had no feelings at all for them. And I wanted her to get out of my doorway so I could go back inside and drink. I couldn't go to a doctor, and I couldn't go outside. I couldn't drive somewhere. And all of that's the outside. But what I said at the end of what I told you about today is that it was effortless today. It was effortless to stand at the front of the grocery store. My wife looked at succulents for 15 minutes. I didn't have to go. That's not my agenda. We have to go get steak now, you know. It was effortless when we drove home to pull over and look at some animals we saw by the side of the road. But everything in May of 1993 was a tremendous effort. It was so ugly and dirty inside of me. And, you know, I don't know if that's what makes me an alcoholic. I think it doesn't. I don't think that is what makes me an alcoholic. But what I was hoping to talk about today was the bondage of self and the grace of the power that animates all things. And what I think makes me eligible to speak to you today isn't that my life was a mess. I was physically abusive to a defenseless person like I'd never been. I couldn't get a job. I think what makes me an alcoholic is I had this obsession. And what it felt like is like I might get up one day at that apartment and take a shower. And I would, the first thing for the last 5 or 6 months of my drinking, the first thing I said to myself, and sometimes out loud, was, don't drink today. Don't do it. And it wasn't because anybody was watching or cared. It was because I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand the frustration and the self-loathing. And I knew my body was giving out and lots of signs were happening. I wasn't functioning correctly. And I knew that I didn't have the money to do it. And I knew that I had other things I needed to do. And I knew it had defeated me. And I would say, don't drink today. And I really meant it. But then I'd think, get a job today, do your laundry today, go see that girl's parents and tell them you're going to be a stand-up guy. Go see your mother today. And I would get in the shower. Sometimes I didn't take a shower every day. There was no need. I just lived in my own stink. And I get in the shower and that hot water would hit my face and I'd feel slightly better. And I was doing something a normal person would do. I was taking a shower and I might have the thought, I'm just saying this is kind of what it was like. I mean, I'm sure this happened, but I might have had a thought like, hey, if you have 2 beers, you'll probably calm down enough to go see your mother. Because I was afraid to go see my mom because I didn't know what she knew. I didn't know if she knew I was unemployed. I didn't know if she knew about this pregnancy because I can't remember what I said to people. And I was really damaged. And the hot water would be coming over me and I think, you know, I probably would. And 2 beers never got me drunk. And 5 minutes ago, I didn't want to drink anything ever again, over and over and over. And I'd go find some change or some, you know, some money. I pawned all my guitars back then, which still breaks my heart. And I'd walk next door to this liquor store, the only place I ever went. And I would think, well, I could buy 2 beers, or for the same amount of 2 single beers, I could buy that cheap gin. and I'm going to come home from mom's house after I have enough to go, and I'm going to need something. So I'll just get the gin. And you all know what happened. I never went. And I'd like to say, you know, if you're new on this call, and we didn't ask for newcomers, but I'm guessing out of 327 people, there's probably several people that are in their first days or months or year of alcoholism. And I did not get freedom from alcohol when I went through the steps of AA. I got freedom intermittently from the bondage of self. And I didn't even know that's what I needed. In fact, the first time I saw the steps, I thought, these are awesome for you guys. I have real issues, man. I need a lawyer. I need Lisa, you know, I need a lawyer and a tax man, and I need some food. And I thought they weren't related to me. And so that was what it was like. And I didn't really tell you what it's like now. I just told you about my day. Oh, and I want to tell you, when I wake my wife up with coffee, I tell her I love her, and I mean it. And I don't have anything to hide from her. And I've never been that way with a woman, ever. And I've consistently done this for 25 years because you helped me. So what happened was I ruined Mother's Day that year. My brother called me and said, hey, it's Mother's Day. It was May 8th he called. And on May 9th, I worked the first step. He called me and he said, hey, tomorrow is Mother's Day. I know you're having car trouble. No one had seen me. And he said, I just want to make sure you come because we're all pretty sure it's Mom's last Mother's Day. And I don't want to tell this whole big story, but I'll try to make it quick because I really want to talk about recovery. But maybe for the new people, this will be helpful. When I got off the phone and realized it was Mother's Day tomorrow, I can't tell you how much I love and respect Dorothy Mitchell. I mean, she gave me my first guitar because I wasn't getting picked first for the team in junior high, and changed my life. She was a quiet woman who observed. My dad was a loud, boisterous, hell of a brilliant man, really funny, adored my mom, but my mom was this steadying influence. And she was something, and I adored her, and I didn't have the conflicts or the angst that people had with their parents. I just skipped that chapter. I just loved them. And he said, it's Mom's last Mother's Day. And I'm like, oh God, I got off the phone. I got to get some flowers. I got to do my laundry. I'm going to write a card. I have a degree in English and a degree in religious studies. I'm what happens when you get those degrees is you're really good at writing cards. You're not much good at much else. But I thought I'll write this card for my mother. I'll look great. I'll smother her with love tomorrow. I can't wait to see her. And I sat down and I drank gin, because it was fast when it worked. And he honked his horn. And it was the next day, and I hadn't gone anywhere. I was still sitting at the couch. And I don't know what happened exactly, but he took me down there, and I ruined it. I left early. They looked appalled and scared. I don't know what I did. I still don't know. I asked my sister a while back, and she said, my sister is one of my closest friends, and she said, you were vile to our mother. I don't ever want to talk about that. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know why. I've never been like that. And the thing about alcoholism is it's a slow, ugly progression. For me, I've watched it. I've been all over the world with AA, and I sponsor lots of people. It's never like, God, I got drunk and 3 weeks later I ruined everything. It's a slow, ugly progression. If alcohol took everything from us in 1 week, everyone would come to AA and get sober. But alcohol is so much more clever than that. It takes a little bite and watches me adjust down. And it takes a little bite and it watches me adjust down until pretty soon I'm living in squalor and I don't even know it. When I was in college, if I was your girlfriend, I was true to you. I wrote songs for you. I left cards on your pillow. If I worked for you, I became a manager of your store. It happened over and over again. I graduated at the top of my class. But 10 years later, I can't tell the truth if my life depends on it. I'm so deeply in the bondage of self that I can't get through a shower without convincing myself to drink, something I don't want to do. So I ruined Mother's Day. Now, my brother drove me home. And now my brother was an interesting guy. I'm the youngest of a group of Irish Catholics. I'm 7 years younger than my next brother up. And he's and he was a handful. He was really kind of the black sheep of the family. But he was sober that day for 12 years. And he drove me home, and I got out of his car and I slammed the door, and I want to hurry up and get to the path of recovery, the slow, beautiful progression of recovery. But I went in the house and I was still mad at him. Now, if you're new, you may not understand the craziness of this, but if you've done the steps, you understand. I just ruined Mother's Day. I was brought back by my sober brother to my terrible life, and he pushed me out of the car, and I thought I had the moral higher ground in whatever I was mad at him about. That's how selfish and self-centered I am. That's how blinding the bondage of self is. The scariest part about it, when you've come out of it a little bit at a time over many, many years, is I've realized the bondage of self is so encompassing, you don't know you're in it. You know, they say around here, the road gets narrower. The road, to me, that's not exactly what I would say. I'd say I get more awake and I become less tolerant for discomfort that I bring upon myself. I think that's what happened to me, because once you've experienced some freedom from the bondage of self, you do realize when you're in it. And I yelled at my brother. I called him up and I screamed at him like, I don't know what I said. I'd love to know. I mean, I was clearly right. Remember being right all the time? God, it's painful. And I just chewed him out, and he listened, and he, because I didn't give him space to talk. And after a little bit of silence, after I ran out of steam, he just quietly said, "Hey, I think you have a problem with alcoholism." Now, I'd heard that before. I'd heard that from brand managers and girls' parents that I was dating and all sorts of people. And I wasn't about to tell my brother anything because I was a little afraid of him. But I'm yelling at him, and he says, "I think you have a problem with alcoholism." And out of my mouth, without my permission, came the words, "Of course I do." And I know today that I worked the first step on May 9th, 1993, standing in my living room with the phone in my hand, yelling at my brother, because I admitted. And I love that word in the second word of the first step, because my experience with these steps is they're surrenders. If I want to get free of the bondage of self, I need surrenders. And the second word is a surrender word. I admitted it. I copped to it. And, you know, it's interesting. I can tell you what the air felt like on my skin in that moment, and how that phone felt in my hand, and the way the dust looked and the slashes of light from the Venetian blinds. And I think the reason I can experience that moment anytime I close my eyes is because it was the first time in many years that I've stepped into the present moment. And it wasn't like, oh my God, I surrendered and I'm never going to drink again. I just said, of course I do. I admitted it. And there was so much quiet relief in me. I didn't recognize it. I wouldn't have labeled it. I just know it. I remember it. And you know, the thing about all of the things that plague me, lust and greed and envy, they're all things that are like not right here, right now. They're things that I want to get, or I got a scheme about, or I regret. And when something happens where you get to really taste the richness of what's happening right now, it leaves a mark on me. And my brother said something really funny when I said, of course I do. He said, don't go anywhere. And I remember thinking, okay, I was going to move to that end of the couch in a few months, but if you don't want me to go anywhere, I haven't gone anywhere since I got fired, like anywhere but next door. But, you know, I make this point. It's very important. And it's very important if you're new. And I don't know who you are, but there's a lot of people. So somebody's new, but he heard something that is the most rare and valuable commodity, even 10 years sober or 20 years sober. And he heard willingness, and I didn't know it. He heard me admit, and he said, don't go anywhere, because he was trying to get back to me as fast as he could, because that willingness can have such a short shelf life, particularly when you're new. Like the guy who called me this morning and is going to meet me tomorrow. I've been doing this a long time. I know there's an 80% chance he's not going to be there. I just know that. And my brother said, don't go anywhere. And he flew to my house and he took me on the beach. And I'll just tell you exactly what he did, and then I'll talk about what happened recovery-wise. But because it's important, because one of the things we get to do here, if we're lucky enough, is we get to try to help somebody really at that gate, at that place where they need to abandon themselves. And my brother just sat on this lifeguard stand. He took me down to the beach because my apartment was unbearable. And he just started telling me what it was like for him when he got thrown out of our house when he was 18. And he earned it. My parents were loyal, family, loving parents, and they had gotten enough advice. And I don't know if Al-Anon or anything, I don't know, but I was 10 years old or 11. And they said, you got to go. And he told me how I felt that day. And he told me how I felt when he got thrown out of his house from his wife and his son. He got his high school girlfriend pregnant. And I remember that day because he called me, I was 14. And he told me how I felt when he lived in his car. And I remember that because I was 17 and I used to look for his car. When I'd borrow my dad's car to go to band practice, and I'd go looking for my brother's car. And I started really not being afraid of him. Because I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it. But he was talking about how I felt sitting on that lifeguard stand. I had no clue. I just felt like safer all of a sudden listening to him. And I really leaned in. Like it says in the big book in the chapter, Working for Others, tell them a little bit of your own story and win their confidence. And I'm so glad my brother is a serious member of Alcoholics Anonymous because he had a lot of practice thumping me on the chest and calling me stupid my whole life. And I've heard many people in Alcoholics Anonymous meetings say their sponsor did some fashion of that. And I would just like to say to 285 people in Tennessee, that is not Alcoholics Anonymous. And it has never been. If you read that book, it says, we never talk down to another alcoholic. It doesn't say, except when you're righteously right and they're not listening. It says never. And I know why. Because I've read the history. I've done this enough. Because it doesn't work. It's demeaning. It says love and tolerance of others are our code. What we want is somebody to grow here. My sponsor says, be a welcoming place. Now, that doesn't mean I don't tell the truth to my sponsees. Sometimes they say I'm yelling at them when I'm talking just like this. You know, the courage of your convictions, but he didn't do that. And you know why? Because he was an alcoholic armed with certain facts about himself. And what he saw in front of him was a sick man. He could have said, you ruined mom's last Mother's Day. You're a loser. What the hell happened to you? You know, where's your talent now? What happened to you? He didn't do that. He told me his own story and won my confidence, and it worked. I agreed to go to AA. I said, you know what? I'm going to go to AA because I'm looking at this guy and he's clear-eyed. He tells the truth. He visits my parents. He has a wife he's loyal to. He has a couple of kids. He has a house. He has a job. All these things I could barely manage brushing my teeth weekly. I wanted to be on his side of the lifeguard stand. And I said, hey, I'll go to AA. And he laughed. He goes, no, man, you're not going to AA. And I was stunned by that. I go, what do you mean? And he said, you're going to a hospital. And because I didn't know it, but he was looking at me. I'm 5 feet 10 and a half, and I weighed 108 pounds that day. And I didn't know it. I weigh 165 pounds today, and I'm just considered thin. And he said, you need to go to a hospital. And immediately, if you're new or even if you've been here a while, I knew I couldn't go to the hospital. I said, how long? He said, 30 days. I go, no, man, I'm busy. I can't go like 30 days. I can't leave all this, you know. I couldn't, you know. Who's not going to pay my bills, man? I'm the guy who doesn't do that. You know, there would have been no change in the universe if I disappeared off the face of it for 30 days. But I was afraid. And you know why I was afraid? Because I was in the bondage of self. Fear is one of the number one signals, the flags to me. I'm in the bondage of self. Somebody read something today on the meditation call, a Buddhist saying. I wrote it down for you guys. They said, in a controversy, the instant we feel anger, we have already ceased striving for the truth and have begun striving for ourselves. That's the bondage of self, fear, anger, resentment. And then we have a prayer here that says, make me a channel of your peace. Now, if I listen to the Buddha and I've started to feel angry, so I'm now striving for myself, it is almost impossible to be the channel of peace if I'm in the bondage of self. And my brother ignored my protestations because he couldn't get me in the hospital that day. And we walked up to the porch and he said, don't die. And he walked away. And I didn't know what I looked like. I thought he knew that I had a gun I put in my mouth at night. Sometimes when I was super self-centered and dramatic, I'd do that. But what happened, so that's what happened. And then he couldn't arrange the hospital for a while. And he called me on May 15th and said, hey, we can get you tomorrow. We got you into this place. Don't drink, which I thought was hilarious. It's like, I'm not going to that hospital sober. I was so afraid. So I got all this alcohol and I stayed up all night and I passed out on the floor and the phone rang and I thought it was him and I picked it up and somebody said, hey, your daughter was born today. We've been trying to get a hold of you. Now they may have been calling that phone. I never answered that phone in the middle of the night because the people on the other end were bad and I didn't want anyone to know where I was. But I don't know if they called or not. I don't know if I was passed out, but they said, can you come to the hospital? And I said, yeah. And I fortunately, I think that's God's grace too, is I was just opened my eyes. I was terribly hungover. I didn't want to go to rehab. So when they said, can you come to the hospital? It seemed like a pretty nice diversion. I didn't think at all about what was happening. And I had these like OR scrubs on and this t-shirt with a hole in it. And I had flip-flops and I had fallen down on a big gulp. So I had Coca-Cola all over my back. And that's how I went to the hospital. I actually didn't go to the right hospital. I went to the wrong hospital. I went to the hospital where I was born because I'm selfish and self-centered, and that's where babies come from. And I drove to the wrong hospital, and that was just one thing too far. That was like, I am such a loser. I'm hungover. I feel terrible. I now know that I've got a soaking wet back. I don't even know what's on my back. I looked like hell, and I went out and decided I was going to go home and kill myself. And I've had a few friends commit suicide in AA and out of AA. And I know what that is. That's the unbearable pain of the bondage of self. And it always makes me so, I kind of laugh at myself when I think my response to going to the wrong hospital was suicide. But I put my head on my steering wheel and I turned the car key and my head popped off the steering wheel because the car backfired. It hadn't been driven in a long time. And it was an AMC. It was a terrible car. And the name of the hospital came into my head. And that's the grace I was talking about earlier. And I know that because I meditate a lot. I do the 11-step I'm very disciplined about it. I can't live without it. And I really can't. I have many, many responsibilities, and I can't show up with Matthew behind the wheel. I have to meditate. And I watched my thoughts for many, many years. And I didn't want to think of the hospital. I wanted to get home and have enough courage to kill myself. And my head bounced off that steering wheel and the name of the hospital came in my head. That is the grace of the power that animates all things. The power that's breathing my breath, right? Growing my hair, yours too. Everything that's happening. All of this technology, it's all this wonderful energy. And that thought got introduced into my head and I drove to that hospital. And I ran up and ran into that room, totally unprepared for what I was about to see. And I saw I saw Anna, and she had gotten up. Right when I saw her, I remembered I pushed her down those stairs and I was terrified with humiliation. And she was happy to see me. And nothing computed. And she looked terrible. She looked like somebody had hit her with a truck. She just had a baby and she looked terrible. And I don't even like her. And she's coming towards me and I'm overwhelmed with how beautiful she is. And I don't like it. I find it off-putting. I didn't think, oh my God, she's beautiful. This is where I belong. I saw how beautiful she was. And I thought, I can't wait to get out of here. There's something happening in here. She was like shiny and there was so much light in her. And it was just the two of us, thank God. And she was running towards me and she stopped and she picked up this baby from a little plexiglass box. I didn't even notice it. And she handed me Phoebe, and Phoebe was way, way better, like more marvelous and more like hard to comprehend how beautiful she was. and they repulsed me because I felt so dirty and so ugly. And that is the bondage of self. I wasn't with them. They were a reflection on me. It's a terrible way to live. And I knew then that I would kill myself because I would hurt them and I wouldn't even want to do it. I wouldn't even mean to. I used to do stuff like that all the time. Do something stupid. If I was your friend, I was your problem with the best intentions. And I looked at Phoebe, I looked at Anna. They lived on a planet I could not reach. They lived on a planet of normal people who told the truth and did nice things. And I didn't live there. I hadn't lived there in a long time. I had to get away. So I said, everything's going to be fine. And what I was thinking is, I'm out. And I drove home as fast as I could. And I ran up the stairs. I'm sorry, I don't have a Kleenex. And my brother was sitting right in front of my front door. He had a duffel bag. He was leaning against the door and he said, "Where you been?" I couldn't even get in my apartment. It's grace. It's everywhere. If you're here, I know for a fact, I'm not guessing, you have it. You've accessed it, or you wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't be here if he wasn't sitting on that porch, keeping me from getting in that house to that gun. And he drove me to the hospital. So how do I tell you about 27 years? About 27 years of AA continually saving my life. And when I say that, like, people, I hear a lot say AA saved my life, like in past tense. And I'm pretty involved. I've stayed really involved. And I think that's grace too. I've moved a couple of times. I've been always close to AA. Sometimes because I have commitments I have to do when I move and they connect me to something else, or, this would be the ugliest divorce ever if I broke up with AA, because so many people would call for years and not know, and I'd have to give all my stuff back and it'd be terrible. But how do I describe how I got from that place to the day I had today? And I really want to emphasize, if you're new, there's only one way that I've seen consistently work for beating down the dragon of the bandage of self, and it's the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've been to all sorts of other stuff. I've been to Vipassana retreats, silent retreats. I've been to worked with psychotherapists on different aspects of alcoholism. I've watched people experiment. I live in California. Everyone's willing to try anything that doesn't take any self-sacrifice out here, but I did the 12 steps. And the way that happened is when I got out of that hospital, my brother said, "Hey, go to a meeting." And I lied and said I was going to go to a meeting. And I walked into my apartment and somebody handed me a beer. Like, I got 30 days. There's smoking pot in there. There's girls in bikinis fresh off the beach snorting cocaine off my glass table. The music is really loud. And I lived in that apartment all by myself. And I don't know what to do. I got 30 days. And what happened in that moment is, this is how I got kicked out of the music industry. I always went with the fun people when I was supposed to get back on the bus, right? So I'm standing there looking at these people with a beer in my hand, and I have this nano thought. And the thought is, hey, you got nothing, man. You look around like most of your stuff's gone. You don't have a job. You can't get a job. You don't even have character or self-respect. You got 3 people left on the planet who may care about you for another couple of weeks if you don't blow it. But you got 30 days. That's all I had. And I really thought that, like, I like these days. I like having the appropriate response to what's happening in the room. I like having some mental acuity. I didn't have it all, and I thought, all I got is 30 days. And am I going to throw it away on these losers again? So if you're in this room and in COVID, you're staying sober and you got 90 days, I hope they're the most precious things you got. I hope you remember how hard it was to get day 3 and 5 and 7 and 10. And I hope you honestly realize the gift of it. The thing about early sobriety is it's kind of subtle. You don't even realize that you're getting healthier. And I ran away from my own apartment and I went to an AA meeting. And I couldn't go home from my AA meeting. And a friend of my brother's was there and he dropped me off at my parents' house, the last place I ever wanted to be. Not because I didn't like them, but because I'm 31 years old. I got this baby across town that just must humiliate them. I've lost my career. I'm practically useless. and they're going through all this stuff, and if you're new, the perception that I had of being dropped off at my parents' house is they love each other. At that time, they were married for 45 years. My mom's dying of cancer. Their loser son's not going to show up on their porch and ruin their night and ruin their life. What am I going to do at their house? It's humiliating for them. It's terrible for me. And I walked up on that porch because I had nowhere to go. He drove away. And I waited those long minutes when my parents came to the door. They're probably like people in Tennessee. My parents are from Illinois. They come to the door together. When someone knocks, my mom and my dad go to the door. My mom's strapped to a giant tank of oxygen. And so I waited there forever, wanting to run away. And you know why I was so afraid? What is fear? It's the number one red flag that I'm in the bondage of self. I'll talk about fear in a minute, but they opened the door and they were glad to see me. Now, if you're new and you remember my perception, the reality was my mom and dad were married for 45 years. They're madly in love with each other. And the one thing they're laying awake thinking about is, how's our boy? Is our boy okay? We didn't know he was in so much trouble. How can we help? And I showed up and said, can you help? It was perfect. And I have to say, after 27 years of ups and downs and recovery, of death and success and accidents, like terrible accidents and love, it's always perfect. Like somebody said to me a long time ago, most problems are simply a lack of context. And my parents just wanted to help me. And I went into my bedroom and I got up the next day terrified. I felt like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I'm like, where am I? I didn't really bargain for this. So I ran out and asked my parents if I'd go to an early meeting. And I went to an early meeting just to get away from them. And I didn't like it. You guys all knew each other and you were all very friendly. And I felt like I was weird, like I always felt. And I went home and I couldn't take me in with my parents after 3 or 4 hours. And I went to the noon meeting. And I did that for a couple of months, going from one uncomfortable place to the other uncomfortable place. But the second step says, we came to believe. We came to believe. And I love that. And again, I want to point that out. Bill was very careful about that language. It doesn't say somebody read we agnostics at us until we gave up and believed. It says we came to believe in the power greater than ourselves. And if it's anything like you guys, for me, like it was for you, I didn't notice. And I have a degree in religious studies. I'm looking, right? But I came home one day from a meeting and I told my parents how funny Bill was at the meeting and how I always liked to see Bill. And I helped my dad make lunch for my mom. And I was sitting there watching my mom try to love my dad into self-sufficiency. She did these little subtle things to try to help him learn to live on his own. My dad didn't even notice. She knew she was leaving and she cared so much. And I saw it. And I really liked being around him. So I would go to the meeting, go, hey, I'll be back in an hour. And I go to the meeting and somebody would say something that read my mail out loud. And I'd go, God, I'm not alone. And I feel a little bit healthier. And then I go home and be with my parents. I came to believe and I didn't even know it. And then I turned my will and my life over to the care of God. No, I didn't. It's just like, I love it when we say, okay, now you're going to work a third step, right? And I'm like, okay, the way my sponsor did it is we read the book. We talked about being in charge and all that. But when you're 90 days sober, what does it mean to turn your will and your life over to the care? I didn't know what it meant. And the first step of it was he said, we're going to get on our hands and knees and we're going to hold hands. And I'm going to say this prayer and you're going to repeat it after me. And all I could think is, no, we're not. I mean, I'm not kneeling on this linoleum floor with this strange guy. I thought, did I ask Jeffrey Dahmer to be my sponsor? What? I never saw this. No one ever says this in a meeting. And I went to 3 meetings a day. Sorry, I got to change gears one. But I got on my hands and knees with this guy. And he started saying this prayer. God, I offer myself to thee. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self. And I went, wow. I heard that. I really did, even at the time. And I went, I want that. That I might better do thy will. What does that mean? Take away my difficulties and victory over them. They may bear witness to those who would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. I said this prayer nose to nose with this guy I hardly know. Excuse me. And I got up and I felt different. I didn't feel like I'd turned my will and my life over to the care of God. I don't even know what that means. I felt like I had done something I didn't want to do because I didn't want to live the way I was living 10 minutes ago. And that's all AA's ever asked me. That's all they've ever asked me to do. And my life is huge. It's like I could do without sleep and never be satisfied because there's so much fun stuff to do. You know, when my parents looked at me with gladness because I said, would you help me? I've raised 4 children to adulthood. Phoebe's 27 years old. And I have I have 2 20-year-old daughters and I have a 23-year-old boy. My favorite sentence in the world is, will you help me? And my favorite place to be coming out of is, I am here and I will do whatever it takes. You know, a great way to learn how to parent teenagers is sponsor Guys and Alcoholics Anonymous. It's great. I've sponsored so many AA members and they don't do what they say. They crash cars. I always say, if you want me there for the landing, please have me there for the takeoff, but they never do. And I've learned by living in these 2 different worlds how to participate in both of them. Right. And one of the things that was important to my recovery and I want to share with you is that I said something to my sponsor early on. I said, I really love Phoebe. And I can't believe how much I love her. I was probably 90 days sober. And he said, he didn't say anything. He ignored me. And then after the meeting, I tried it again. And he said, hey, could you stop saying that? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, how much child support do you pay? I said, well, I live at my parents' house and I work on a loading dock at midnight from to 4 in the morning. I deliver packages I can barely pay my gas. And he said, well, I know what your circumstances are. I just asked you how much child support you pay. And I said, I don't pay any. And he goes, well, then stop lying to me. Show me you love your daughter. This isn't a program of talk. He said, you go to 1,000 meetings a week. You must know this is a program of action. Why don't you show me you love her? Then you'll never have to tell me again. Now, he did not yell at me and he did not call me stupid. He told me the truth. And I got mad. And what is anger? It's one of the red flags of the bondage of self. And I had no idea. I went home and stormed around my old bedroom at my parents' house, trying to hold on to righteous indignation. I'll tell you, that's hard when you're 30 years old. But about the 4th time around, pacing around my room, I thought, he's right. I'm full of it. I wanted somebody to think I was a nice man, that I loved my daughter. So I called Anna and I paid child support. Every 2 weeks I paid it because I couldn't get a bank account. I paid it whenever I paid my check. And I go over to that house and she lived with her parents. And after a few weeks, it wasn't humiliating to show up on that doorstep and hand her the money. I'd go in and I'd play with Phoebe. And Phoebe would, I remember she was about 1.5. They were going off to college and I was holding Phoebe and I said, hey, baby, I'm going to be your dad forever. This is it. I'm him. I'm going to take you to kindergarten, your first day in first grade. And I'm going to buy you a car when you're 16, which I always think that's funny that I said that as a newcomer. I didn't have a car when I said that to her. I was borrowing my parents' car, but I'll buy you one when you're 16 and I'll pay for college. I owe everybody money. I don't know how I'm going to pay for college. And I said, I just love it. I just love being your dad. And it wasn't lost on me that a year before that, my solution to seeing them was suicide, because I was so clamped into the bondage of self. And I had no idea that there was these practical steps to take, practical actions that would get that out of me. And, I made amends by paying child support, and I made amends by never being late. We never went to court. Whenever I got a raise, they got a raise. She stay with me when she wanted to stay with me as she got older. She went around the world with my family and different trips. She's, her mom and I were really great parents together until she was 18. And then we haven't talked much because I just talked directly to Phoebe. But the point of that story is also the reason I could sit there and be glad about being her dad is I was cleaner inside. I wasn't filthy. Her beauty didn't make me sick. It made me, it thrilled me because I could see it and participate with it. And I wasn't less than. And, you know, a lot of guys I sponsor say, I'm going to put my own name at the top of my 8-step list, because clearly I've hurt myself more than I've hurt anyone else. And you know, I'm naturally sarcastic. I'm 100% Irish, and I naturally want to say something snappy, but I don't. I always say, hey man, I got an idea. Put your name at the bottom of that 8-step list. Make all those other amends, and then you come tell me whether you need to make amends to yourself or not, because I don't think you will. And all my amends have been amends to myself. I didn't even know it. I paid back all the money, tens of thousands of dollars, and I've gone to panels, and I've gone to jails, and I'm current with somebody. I've done everything because I love this feeling of being present. You know, I want to say that I found the woman of my dreams, not in AA. I was sober, and you know, the story's great, but I don't have time to tell it. I met her at a bus stop and made a bad impression on her. And then she was at the bus stop the next day, and she said we could have coffee, but she'd never go out with me. And 2 weeks after that, she proposed to me, and she's asleep in the other room taking a nap right now. And she's like the most amazing person. And she's British. She has this great accent. She's very, very intelligent. She reads poetry for fun. So I finally have somebody that doesn't make me feel weird all the time. And she accepts me just like I am. We've raised these children, and we've had a life, like a real life, like good and bad. You know, we've been married for 25 years. And when we were married for 5, my wife had a terrible stroke. My wife is brain damaged and paralyzed. Pretty massive stroke. There was a tear in her carotid artery in her neck from a massager from Sharper Image. And it tore the interior wall of her carotid, and she's never been the same. So for 20 years, I've been my wife's caregiver, and that's kind of BS. For 20 years, I've dressed her in the mornings and I've dressed her at night. I've done everything that takes 2 hands, and I remember important dates. But my wife gives the care. She keeps the boat steady. She weeds out what's unimportant and keeps me focused on what is important. And you know what my wife has done for me over and over again? Is brought me back to the present moment. Because when you love someone that has brain damage, you understand personal powerlessness at a depth that I can't describe. And personal powerlessness is not a bad thing if you're living right where you are. It's a terrible, torturous thing if you're trying to live in the future or the past. And my wife often just says, hey, just be right here. Don't worry. So I don't know if I've done a good job of describing how I've been relieved of the bondage of self. And I'm not. I mean, intermittently I am, you know. It's a consistent thing. That's why I said when somebody said, or over and over, AA saved my life. AA saves my life. And I don't mean I get into tough situations and, you know, I need lawyers, guns, and money in AA. What happens is AA just teaches me I have a part in this. You know, there's a great line in the book, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Any person on earth who got in as much trouble as we did drinking, that is like gold, that sentence. Hey, this is the root of our troubles. It's selfishness and self-centeredness. That's good to know. The problem is, like, how do I become unselfish? And I only know one way. And it's the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every single one of them, all the time. And after a while, if you're new and you think, I don't want to live like that, I can tell you for sure, if you're new, I want to really tell you this. AA is not my life. My life is my life. My love for my children, my skill set that I bring to work, my intimacy with my wife, and emotional and physical intimacy, the fun I get to have playing all these instruments now that I can afford instruments again, that's my life. AA is just my compass. AA is my path. AA is my moral mechanisms for meeting life's problems. I'll tell you, my experience is life is a consistent invitation to grow. Every year, every week, every month, There's another invitation, another problem I've never had before. And I'll finish with this. Fear. My sponsor said to me, fear is the false belief that you will not have the resources you need to meet the challenges of the present moment. Fear is the false belief you won't have the resources you need to meet the challenges of the present moment. And if you're new in here, you got a lot of those. You think, how am I going to straighten that out? Am I going to stay sober? How do I stay sober during a pandemic? How do I do this? How do I do that? Well, when you get to where you need to do it, there will be enough information for you to get through that day. That's all I've ever gotten. That's all I've ever gotten. And what happened over time is I've relaxed. I've let go of the wheel. I've meditated. I greeted the day just like it was. I talked on the phone to a newcomer. I brought my wife a cup of coffee and I went shopping, and it was effortless. Thanks for letting me share.